what we're going to talk about is how your brain actually, with its eyes, takes in the information. So we're going to talk about range reading, which is the entire range of speeds at which your eyes and your brain coordinate while you're reading books, reading comics, whatever it is that you're actually taking in. We're going to talk about how your eyes and how your brain do it. What I want to do, first of all, is just ask you how you think you read. So what I'd like you to do is to take your forefinger, like this, put it up in front of you, pretend that there's a little book here, and that you're reading the book, and with your finger, show me the speed and movement that your eyes read. Okay, off you go. Do it for about a minute. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep it going, keep it going. As it keeps going, have a look around and see what everybody else is doing. Look and see what everybody else is doing as you keep it going. Okay, stop. Right. Now you've done, on average, what most people in the world do, and that is basically along the line fairly slowly and smoothly, back to the next line, so on and so forth. In countries like Japan and Israel, it'll be up and down or back and forward, but it's fundamentally the same movement. Smoothly along the line, back, smoothly along the line, back, smoothly along the line, back. And interestingly, that is not the way your eyes do it. Your eyes don't actually do it that way. So what we're going to do next is work in groups of two, and you are going to see how your eyes work by seeing how your partner's eyes work. And I'll just get a book here to show you how to do this little exercise. One of you is going to hold the book up above your head while your partner looks like a scientist into your eyes. In your families, you can choose whoever's doing it with whoever. Right, so one of you holds the book up with your lips closed, because this is silent reading. You're going to read about 3 lines really, really slowly. That means about half a word at a time, while your partner looks exactly at what you're doing. Then you read at your normal speed for about 3 lines, and we hope that'll be a bit faster than the half a word a time. So you read at your normal speed, again mouth closed, again while your partner examines what your eyes are doing. You don't discuss it until your partner then does the same thing and you watch your partner's eyes. Then you can talk about what you saw your partner's eyes do. Okay, so book up, slow reading, normal reading, then change partners and examine what each other's eyes are doing, starting now. Now, did your partner's eyes go in nice, smooth lines like you showed me at the beginning? No? No? How did they go? Show me with your fingers how they went.
Like a typewriter.
Like a typewriter. Dunk, 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 dunk. And do you see any of them kind of going, skipping back at all?
Yeah.
Yeah? Yeah? Dunk, 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 dunk. And yet we always think that they go like this. Now, what I've done up here is start a little mind map, and we're going to talk about the slow reader and the range reader, and talk about how we can use what you've just found out to double and 4 times your speed on enjoyable reading, study reading, business reading, whatever kind of reading you want to do. So this one is the slow reader. This one down here is the range reader. Range reader is more advanced than a speed reader. Speed reader is simply going fast all the time. It's like somebody who has to do the 100-yard dash everywhere they go. It's a bit of a waste of time. So what you want to do is know how to go slow, how to go fast, how to do the marathon, how to do the 10,000 meters, and so on. So you're going to be a range reader. Now the slow reader does exactly what you saw happen. Moves and stops. These little dashes here are words on the line. Moves and stops, moves and stops, moves and stops, moves and stops, moves and stops. Skips back over a word, moves and stops, wanders off the page, comes back, moves and stops, skips back, boom, 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 like that. Now the range reader, the good reader, does exactly the same thing, but more efficiently. Instead of stopping on every word, the range reader stops on 2 words, or 3 words, or even 4 words at a time, taking a little photograph like a camera. And exactly the same principles about how the eyes work apply. They move and stop, move and stop, move and stop, move and stop, move and stop. And every time the eyes stop, it takes about 1/4 to 1.5 seconds. So we can write in here, the stops are from 1/4 to 1.5 seconds. And it doesn't matter how old you are, the same thing happens if you're 2 years old, 5 years old, 10 years old, 20 years old, 80 years old, 90 years old. Same basic rule. So we immediately now have 4 things you can do, now you know how your eyes work, to improve the speed at which you read. Number 1, is to cut down the number of times you go back over words. Number 2, is not to wander off the page so much. Number 3, is to stop on the words for not so long. Photograph them quicker. And if you normally photograph them at 1 second, and you get down to half a second, you've already doubled your reading speed. It really is easy to start to read faster. And number 4 is to take words in groups. Four steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, and already you are doubling or 4 times multiplying your reading speed. And your eyes have to work like this. They work like these little cameras. And you can check that they have to do it by 2 more little exercises, and these ones you can do yourself. In the first one, you're going to look at both your hands absolutely, perfectly, clearly, all the time as you move them back and forward in front of your face. Okay, so put your hands up by your side, and look at both hands absolutely clearly so you can see them perfectly all the time as you move them back and forward in front of your face. Try that. Okay, stop. Anybody who can do that, I'll buy a drink. In fact, anybody who can do that must have had a drink before, because the only way you can do it is your eyes crossing this way and your eyes crossing that way. You have to be focused still. Now you can check it again. If you put your forefinger in front of your nose like this and focus on it, and then keep looking at the forefinger tip really clearly as you move it right to the edges and up and down as far as your eye can see without moving your head, and see what your eyes have to do to keep looking at it clearly. Take it really as far as you can. Keep your head still. Take it as far to the side, as far up, and see what your eyes have to do to keep it clear. Okay, stop. What do they have to do? They have to move with it, right? In other words, they're holding it still, which is why they have to hold the words still. Did anybody find in that little exercise that it got a little bit painful near the edges? Yeah, how many people? Can we just see? Yeah, most. Why do you think that is?
We don't do it.
Yeah, we don't use our eyes nearly as much as we could. We're kind of lazy with them. We tend to look just in this little area here. We don't have mountain lions jumping out of things, so on and so forth.
Do we have a natural restriction on field of vision?
Natural restriction on field of vision is the question there. We're going to explore that in about 3 minutes. And you will see what your restriction is, if there is one. Coming back to this little pain at the end of the eyes, this is a good daily visual eye workout. You can do it for your family member, or you can do it yourself. Okay? Don't recommend you do it on public transport in the trains and buses. Kind of walking around saying, well, I'm a Tony Buzan speed reader and a brain superior personality here. People are going to get a little bit confused about who you are. But if you do it in the privacy of your own home, together with your friends and family, it's a really good visual workout. So, we've got these 4 steps. The next question is, how wide is this range of vision? The question Doris asked, what are the limits? So you've got another exercise with your partner, and this time, your partner is going to look right in the middle of your head, right there. And the partner's face will be about this distance. Okay, right there they're looking. You're going to put your 2 fingers up like this, and start to move them, and slowly pull them apart, while your partner keeps looking here. And your partner will say stop, without looking at the fingers, looking here. The partner says stop when they can't see the fingers moving anymore. And then you'll know how wide the vision is. Then you put your fingers here, move them like this, pull them apart, while your partner is still looking here. And when your partner can't see the movement anymore, your partner says stop, and you know how deep the vision is. Okay? Try that with your partners now. How wide is that vision? Wide, right? How deep is it?
Deep.
Deep. And we tend to think of ourselves as seeing just this kind of little small funnel in front, a few words, but the good news is that your eye sees a mass of stuff. So you have a big, deep vision this way and wide vision this way, which means when you come to a book, your eye can take in the entire page. Now you don't see all the words clearly, but you see a lot more clearly than you think. And the ones you don't see clearly, you can still sense, like you sense the motion out there. Which means that while you are reading, your brain is going to be reviewing what you've already read and checking what's coming without you even knowing it. In the same way in survival, in the same way in terms of your mental direction. For example, if the family's just bought a new car, right? They say, let's go out in our new car. You're driving along the road, what do you all start noticing in the car? It's the first time you've had this car, the whole family's gone out. Say it again.
Other cars just like it.
Other cars just like it. You know, everybody in the family says, hey, look at there's one over there. You know, oh, look, there's one in the back mirror. Look, hey, look at that, same. One coming out of the side seat over there. Now, you haven't said to yourself, we've got to see all the cars the same, have you? But your brain has said, this is interesting information, connect, associate, link, whatever. And your brain is looking through this giant peripheral vision. You have 100 million light receivers in each eye for this outside vision. And in reading, you use the same thing. You say to your brain, when I'm reading, I want the names of the people, I want this information, I want this, these are the goals I want. And as you're reading, your brain is going to scan around like it does for the same cars and pick out the information. So now, you've got a 5th technique. And the 5th technique is to use this wide vision, which means you're going to hold the book close to your eyes or farther away. Farther away. Right? They often say that. People don't quite understand why, and that is the reason why. Farther away. Now the question that then comes up is, if we're going to start reading really fast, what happens to the comprehension? Right? Because we're now taking groups of words, we've got wide vision going, we're not back skipping, we're starting to really speed along. What's going to happen to your understanding and comprehension as you read faster? In the beginning it's not going to be so good, and then you get used to it, it might get better? So if you get into the habit, it could get better. What about over here? Any other thoughts? How many people think that as your speed goes up, your comprehension is going to go up as well? How many people think that as the speed goes up, your comprehension is going to get a bit wobbly and start to go down? Nearly everyone, right? For example, let me borrow that big, tough book here, Doris, if I may. Good book, right? Standard kind of study book to make you all terrified. If I say this is an important book, you've got to study it, you've got to read it, you've got to remember it, 100%, all those kinds of things. So I want you to take it home and read it something and something. What's the phrase I use? Slowly and carefully. How many people have heard that phrase? Right. Why slowly and carefully? To remember it and understand it. Right? So I'm now going to speak to you slowly and carefully just to make sure you understand and comprehend and remember everything I say. It is real Lee imp ought and to list to what is go ing to. Now I notice to my increasing annoyance that some of you are not paying attention to what I'm saying. What's happening in your brain? Wandering off when I'm talking, James? How come? Bored when I'm talking? What do you mean bored? It's a strain to concentrate. Why is it a strain to concentrate? Because my brain is going faster than that kind of slow speed. And in reading it's the same. If you read really slowly, your brain wanders off. That's why so many people have problems with concentration, because they're trying to read slowly and carefully. Now I'm speaking here, especially now at about 400, 500, 600 words a minute. You can understand it perfectly easy. But when I start to speak at normal slow reading speed, you can't understand it. And how many people have you seen reading like this? Anybody seen anybody read like that? Right, that's slowly and carefully, and the more slowly and carefully you read, the less you understand, so you read more slowly and carefully, and eventually you end up not reading, which is what most people do, not read very much at all. So you read slightly faster, and your comprehension goes up. If you go into most libraries, what are at least half the people normally doing? Which? Reading, and the other half are? Sleeping. Right? Yeah. Libraries are these kind of giant bedrooms around the place. You know, everybody kind of starts with about 10 minutes and then donk, because they're actually sending themselves to sleep. So what you want to do when you're reading a book is to read faster, and your comprehension goes up. So make a little note on your note there that fast equals good comprehension, good understanding. So we now know you can not back skip, you don't have to wander off, you can take in big groups, and that as you go faster, you get better, and you've got this lovely wide vision which is reviewing and previewing for you as you read. The last question is, what about what a lot of children do when they start to read? You're just teaching people to read, especially children. What do they regularly do?
Go to sleep.
Go to sleep, stutter, and put the finger on the page. They point. Now why do they point? So they know where they are. And why do we tell them to take it off? So they can go faster, because it slows them down. Because we know we speed along, don't we? But actually, the normal reading speed on study is around 0 to 90 words. Standard books about 240 words a minute. Normal reading speed isn't like this, right? This is about 1,000 words a minute, right? 12 words a line, dong, gadong, gadong. You just add it up in a minute, 1,000 words a minute. The normal speed at which you read, members of your family read is like this. Dong, 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 skip back, dong, off the page, dong. And that's the line. So the young child is showing us what we do. So the question is, should we use the guide again? We're going to do a little exercise in groups of 2 to check that. And this time you're both going to sit with your arms folded. One of you is going to imagine a perfect circle in front of you, perfect circle, and you're going to look, keeping your head still, perfectly around that circle. Your partner is going to look at what your eyes do, and you are going to feel what your eyes do, and when you've done it once, you reverse roles. And then tell each other what you saw. Okay, take your partners and check that little exercise. Okay, were those beautiful, smooth, perfect circles? Show me what they look like. Yeah, we've got crippled triangles in there, battered rectangles, all kinds of, smashed squares. How did it feel to do? Strained, difficult, right? So this time you're going to help your partner, and this time with the tip of your finger, you are going to trace the circle. Your partner is going to feel what it feels like just to focus on the tip of your finger, keeping the head still, following it around. When you're guiding your partner, go around once, like that. Don't follow the tip of your own finger as you're, right? You're supposed to be watching your partner's eyes. Keep the finger about that far from their face. Don't stick it under their chin, so they got to do all this kind of stuff. And if you haven't been getting along with your family member, no kind of, you're under my control now, you're going to sleep, do what I say. Just once around easy, and then change, and then talk about what you saw, okay? Starting now. Okay, how does that feel? How did that one feel? More comfortable? How was the circle? Smooth, easier to do, right? Real smooth, real easy. And the answer is guide. I've written it up here, large. You use a guide and your reading will improve on every level. The guide solves all the problems, establishes the goals. It helps you not skip back. It helps you not wander. It helps you take quicker photographs. It helps you expand your vision. It relaxes your eyes. And the way you do it, and I'm going to do a lot more of this when we talk about study, is simply take something like a pen or a pencil or a pointed object and just gently guide your eyes along the lines. It's really easy. It doubles, triples, 4 times improves your speed, gives you better comprehension, solves all the problems. And as I say, when we get to study, I'm going to talk to you about how in detail you use this guide. When you do, you're going to be reading 4 times as fast or 5 times as fast. And we're going to combine that kind of information, your eyes, with the mind mapping, with the memory techniques, with using left and right brain to show you how you can get through entire study books. I mean, you'll be eating study books for breakfast. Yeah? Most people say, oh, study, horrible, yuck, blur, difficult, exams, fail, so on and so forth. You'll say, gimme, gimme, gimme. Okay, we now move on to one of the most exciting parts, and this is an exploration of your memory. What happens to your memory while you're learning, and how can you use that knowledge once you know it? What happens to your memory after you finish learning, and how can you use that knowledge to your advantage? So we're going to start with another little memory test, and this one you don't have to write anything down. All you have to do is to remember this long list of words that I'm going to read, and I'll tell you before you start that most people can't remember it, so remember as many of the words as you can. Starting now. Book, mountain, shoe, floor, cloud, of, and, the, of, boat, and, cage, Muhammad Ali, rope, and, chair, the, of, finger, house, sunshine, dog. Now, I don't want you to write anything down. Just want you to think about those words you've got in your head. And what I've done here is, on this little graph, I've predicted the result of the memory that's in your head right now. And I will gamble everything that this is going to be basically correct. So I'm going to ask you questions, and then I'm going to show you how this already tells me the result of what's in your brain right now. So, first of all, I want hands up anybody, and don't say anything because you don't want to give away any clues, but just hands up anybody who can remember the first word that I read out. Don't say it, but just hands up if you can remember that first word. Put them right up so I can see. Okay, we've got about 70%. Keep them up. Keep them up. Keep them up if you can still remember the first two. Good. Okay, good. Keep them up. Keep them up. Keep them up if you can remember the first three. A couple of hands gone down there. If you can remember the first four. A few more hands going down. The first five. One hand left up. The first six. Right. Now, it always happens that way. And what this little graph here shows, this is the amount you remember. So this is nothing, and this is more and more and more and more and more and more and more. And this is the time, as time goes on, while you're learning something. And what it shows here is your memory. You remember more at the beginning. Second word, maybe. Third word, maybe. Fourth word, not so much. Fifth word, not so much. Sixth word, most people have dropped off. Seventh word, very few. And the memory starts to sag down. So the first thing to note, you can make a big word here, is first. First. Make that in really big letters, because your memory remembers, when you are learning something, the first things better than other things. So the first things you tend to remember better. Now again, hands up, anybody who can remember the last word that I read. The last word. Good. Okay, we got... Okay. Okay, hands down. Hands up anybody who can remember 1, 2, or 3 of the last 3 or 4 or 5. Okay. Now you notice there's a slight rise in memorizing the last thing, but it's not so big as what you remember at the beginning. So you also put on your note here, last. Because your memory, when you're learning something, remembers the last things. For example, if I said, think in your memory the last pop drink you had, or the last hamburger you had, or the last meal you had, or the last cup of coffee you had, you could probably remember that fairly well, and maybe even where you were and what you were thinking and who you were with. But if I said, tell me in detail about the 25th hamburger before the last one you had, you say, oh yeah, totally forgotten. Because in the middle, your memory drops. At the beginning, at the first, it's good. At the end, it's good. In the middle, it drops unless certain things happen. Now, how many people, hands up, can remember any word that appeared more than once? 100%, right? You see how well the memories work. You can say those words. What were the words that appeared more than once? And, of, J. And, of, and any other word? The, right? And there they all are waiting for you. And, of, the. Now, why do you remember those? Repetition, right? Repetition. Now, when I came to the second and, what did you think in your brain? Like, what happened when I came to the second and, or the second of, or the third the? What did you think in your brain? That's right. I've heard it before. I've heard that one before. So what your brain does is, when it repeats something or hears something repeated, it says, I've heard it before, and links it together. So these three high points here are for when your brain gets repetition, so you can put repeat, and your brain will remember it, and link, or associate. Because when your brain links or associates, it remembers better. So we now know that when you're learning something, reading something, studying something, you remember more of the first, more of the end, more if things are repeated, more if they are linked, and there's another thing which helps you remember. Does anybody here recall from the list that I read a word or phrase which was very different from all the others? Some word or phrase which was not the same as all the others. Okay, say what was it? Do you agree? Muhammad Ali, yes? Now why did you remember that? Because he was famous? Right. Because he was different, right? He was different from the standard old list of words. And your brain remembers, and here we've got this other high point of memory, remembers the things which stand out. So on your notes there, put stand out. Which means we now have some really major, important things for your memory. Lots of people don't do very well in memory and in learning and in study and those kinds of things because they don't realize this and aren't able to use it. But we now know you remember more of the beginning, more of the end, more if things are repeated or linked, and more if things stand out. Now this whole memory rises if you are interested. So across the bottom here you can put interest. Interest. And again, in all my studies with memory, I've never found somebody with a really bad memory. I mean, some people say they've got bad memories, but then you say, well, tell me about your hobby. And it may be stamp collecting or sports or whatever it is, and they will go on and on for days talking about it. And that's pure memory because they are interested. So if you can get interested in something, your memory rises. The whole thing rises. So we've now got a number of key words. The first things are remembered best, last things remembered best, repeated things remembered best, linked things remembered best, things that are outstanding remembered best, and things where you have high interest are remembered best. Now once you know this, you can then start to organize your memory so it works better. For example, let's say you've got a book to study, you've got 4 hours that you're going to devote to studying it. Knowing how your memory works, is it a good idea to sit down and study for 4 hours and then stop? Is that a good idea? Sybil, you say no, why? You're right, it's not a good idea.
Leave everything in the middle out.
Yeah, because if you're studying for 4 hours, you're going to leave everything in the middle out in terms of your memory, aren't you? So what I'm going to do next is show you a new graph which is going to explain for you how you can actually take the memory you've got and this knowledge and organize your time for studying, for meeting, for using your brain's memory in a way which is going to give you lots of high points and very few low points instead of what usually happens, which is lots of low points and very few high points. And what we've got here, miraculously transformed, is the same graph, but this time we're using our time well. So this is the amount you remember up here. This is time that you're learning, and the time ends here. And these curves, these low ones, show what happens if you don't take breaks while you're learning. And most people think you shouldn't take breaks. You know, if you're studying, it's got to be nose to the grindstone, shoulder to the wheel, pound on through, which is why so many people fail in school and universities and business, simply because they're treating their memory in the wrong way. This graph down here shows you studying for too long without a break. You know that you're going to remember a lot of the beginning, and as time goes on, your memory goes down, and you study for an hour, and 2 hours, and 3 hours, and your memory is going down, and down, and down, and down. It may have a little rise at the end, but if you're really exhausted, it's just going to collapse. Now, if you want to study properly, what you do is, let's say you've got a 4-hour study period. How long should you study before taking a break? Roughly how long do you think is sensible to study, to learn, before taking a break? Yes, right. Yeah, about an hour, somewhere between 30 minutes and 60 minutes, and then you take a break. So up here in the blue, we've got that you start studying, you go for 30, 40, 50 minutes, and then you take a break. So you've got a high point here and a high point here. You take a little break. What should you do in the break? Relax. Right? Dance, listen to music, talk to a member of the family, lie down, do a bit of exercise, whenever you feel like to be different. And then you come back to study again, and you've got another what? Another high point, another first in memory, and a little low, and then another last, which is another high point. And then you do what? Relax, take another break, and you've got another high point, and another high point, and another high point, and another high point. So in the same time period, if there were two of you, if you were two people, and one of you was studying and not taking a break, and the other one was studying and managing the memory well, the one who didn't take a break has how many high points? One here and a lowish high point here. The one of you who is taking the breaks has how many high points? How many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 high points. And the low points are not so low because these little high points hold them up. So in the same study period, if it was you studying one this way and one of you this way, this one would remember as much as 50 to 60 to 70% more, and at the end of it, which one is going to be more relaxed, refreshed, and happy? The one that has all the high points. I mean, you're going to be smart, you're going to have remembered it all, you're going to be confident, your motivation is going to be up. The question then comes up, what happens during these breaks? It's going to happen to your memory during the breaks. That's why a lot of people won't take the breaks. It's going to happen to your memory. How many people think it's going to go up during the break? Nobody. How many people think it's going to stay about the same during the break? How many people think it's going to go down during the break? How many people aren't thinking? Okay, let's take a really good guess on this. Think about it. You're having a little break. What's going to happen to your memory? Right? Now this time, vote. How many people say the memory is going to get better in the break? Okay, how many people say it's going to stay about the same? How many people say it's going to go down during the break? Okay, very smart class actually. A lot of people think that they shouldn't take a break because the memory is going to go down. But what is interesting is that in these study breaks, what do you think actually is going on in your brain even though you're not thinking about the study? going on in your brain? You're recalling? Yeah. Your brain is actually starting to integrate, which means that I can now take you to a new graph which is going to show you what happens in small breaks and in big breaks to your memory after you finish learning and while you are also continuing to learn. And what happens is what most people think doesn't happen. And in this next graph, this again is the amount you remember. And this is time as it goes along after you've been studying. And what most people think is that when they finish studying, let's say you've studied for 4 hours now, and you suddenly stop, what do you think happens to your memory? You finish studying, what happens to your memory after you study? Everybody forgotten what happens to their memory after they study? Well, I'll tell you what the 3 most common thoughts are. Some people think that it starts off fairly high and then sinks down in a curve like this and gradually levels off and carries on at about 5% for some time. Other people think that their memory starts fairly high, stays fairly high for a while, and then drops down and then carries on. And other people who aren't too optimistic at all think that their memory starts fairly high and immediately drops, boom, and is gone forever. And all of those are not correct. What actually happens to your memory after you finish learning is this. If you've been learning and learning and learning and learning and learning, and you stop learning, you take a rest, and this could be a long time, your memory starts to improve. It gets better and better and better while you're doing nothing. You can be hanging around, you can be sleeping, you can be dancing, you can be talking with your family. Your memory is getting better because what is going on in your brain? What's going on in your brain? Even though you're not thinking about what you studied, what's happening in here?
It's integrating the material.
That is exactly it. It's integrating the material. It's got all this stuff in there. And it says, just give me a little break and I will sort it all out. And so as you break, as you rest, your memory gets better. And it reaches a high point here. And this high point, very important, because after that high point, it sinks quickly. This is forgetting. Some people call their memories not a memory, but they say it's my forgettery. I put everything in there, and that's where I forget it. And they forget it because after this high point, it drops, and it drops 80% of the detailed information in one day down here. So if you studied for an hour and you stop, you get this nice little rise and then it drops. Now if you don't want it to drop, what's the best thing to do? Review, right? Check it over again. So at this little point, what you do is you say, I know my memory is going to drop if I don't review, so I'm going to review. What's the best way to review? Go over it. Ask questions of yourself. And if you've been studying a book, what kind of notes are you going to be making? Mind maps. So what are you going to review? Your mind maps, right? So you can sit there and make a quick mind map of everything you think you remember, and then compare it with the mind map from your study. If you do that, this graph changes. And your memory goes out, and it stays high for about a day, and then it will start to drop, but not so fast. So what do? Review again. And how do you review? Right, do a mind map. Megan, you got them all dead on here. You do a quick mind map, compare it with your previous one, and now the information is really getting lodged in there. And what then happens is an interesting thing. You start to remember and learn more than what you had here. This graph starts to go up because what's happening in your brain? You've reviewed and you've reviewed. What else is then beginning to happen to your brain? This is a complex question. Yeah, you are beginning to connect what you've learnt in your study to all the other things that you learnt before. So your brain is starting to expand its knowledge internally. You suddenly think, oh, that's interesting. That little thing I learnt in history connects with something I learnt 10 years ago. So your knowledge starts to expand. And after a little while, if you don't review and don't use your brain, it will start to drop. So you do what again? Review, right? How do you review? With a mind map. So you do it again, and it starts to go even more upwards. And you keep this little review practice going. You can review, say, after the first 10 minutes of study, quick review. That'll keep it out for a day. Then review with your mind map again. That'll keep it going out for at least a week and maybe even up to a month. You then review after a month or 6 months, and that keeps it way, way up, and it puts it into a place called LTM. LTM. What do you think LTM stands for? Very good. Long-term memory, or lifetime memory. You're so good down here, Megan, I don't even need to teach this anymore. You can come up and do it for me. Long-term memory. It's the kind of memory you have for your name, for your family, for your own personal history, the kind of thing which comes just automatically. And now you begin to look at the difference between you, if you use your memory and your knowledge of it, and you, if you don't. Because you, if you don't, studies, memory goes up, and then the memory starts to go down. And you end up, after a couple of weeks, without reviewing, with maybe 5%. Maybe 5%. And the associations in your brain, the hooks, the mind maps, are going to be weaker and less. If you are reviewing, you're the same up to here, but then it starts to get really interesting, because you are remembering all of this, and it's getting more and more and more, and you're up to 80 plus percent, because your brain is starting to connect all the things you've learnt with all the rest of the things that you've learnt. So you are already here into the realm of 20 times better in terms of your memory. Now, if you apply all the things we've now talked about with memory, if while you are learning, you are using that first, you're using the end, you're making links and associations, you're getting your interest going, your motivation going. If you're managing your time so the breaks are happening nicely, you know that in the breaks, this is happening, this integration period. And then when you finish learning, you have nice spaced reviews. You're going to remember more and more and more and more. Now let's imagine again that there are two of you, right? Two of Christy, two of Rosie, two of James, two of all of you, and one of them doesn't review, and one of them regularly does review for a year. Which one is going to be a lot smarter than the other at the end of the year? The one who doesn't review or the one who reviews? The one who reviews. So you have the choice of how smart you become. It's nothing to do with your basic lack of intelligence or stupidity or whatever people think there is. It's how you use the knowledge you got. Now let's say it's the end of a year and there are the two of you, and there's the one who hasn't reviewed and there's the one who has reviewed, and you've both got to read the same new book. Which one of you is going to be able to read it better and with more understanding? The one who reviewed. Why? Absolutely right. Why? Why is the one who's reviewed going to be able to read the new book faster and better and with more understanding? Yeah, Jean. The more you use the brain, the better you are. Frank?
I was going to say the habit of remembering.
The habit of remembering. Your brain gets used to remembering. And you've got more information in here, haven't you now? Your brain's got more information, which means it can do what with new information? connect, associate, hook. So the more you know, and the more you use your memory in these ways I've explained, the more easy it is to know more. The more you know, the more easy it is to know more. You don't get all cluttered and full up. You see a lot of people saying, well, I'm not going to learn anything else because my brain is nearly full and I'm saving all the precious few remaining little spaces for the really important stuff. It's the opposite. The more you know, the more easy it is to know more. The less you know, the more difficult it is to know more. Because you haven't got any hooks and associations, and your brain's groping around for understanding. That reminds you of a biblical phrase. Is anybody reminded of any biblical phrase there? That the more you know, the more easy it is to know more, and the less you know, the less easy it becomes to know more. Any phrase that's reminded? I'll give you a clue. Right? To him that hath shall be given. To him that hath not, even that little which he has shall be taken away. And I used to think that God was really mean, you know. I mean, fancy giving to the people who've got it all and taking it away from the poor people who didn't. But what that kind of phrase means is that if you've got it, and you've got it, right, you have an amazing memory. And if you use it, then more and more will be given. You'll get more and more and more. If you've got it, and you have got it, but you start to take it away, then you'll get less and less and less and less. And what is fascinating about this is that remembering is easier than forgetting. It's really difficult to keep forgetting, because then you get stuck down here and you can't remember and you can't learn and you get bored and you're not motivated and you pound away for too long and you don't remember what you've been studying. Whereas remembering is easy. You take more breaks. You know things happen nicely at the beginnings and ends, so you get lots of firsts and lots of lasts. You know that if you imagine, it's going to help you make things outstanding. You know if you associate and link, which is enjoyable anyway, it's like a mind map, you're going to remember more. And you know that if you do simple little reviews with things like a mind map, then your memory is going to get better and better and better and better. So in the family situation, if you come home from school and you've got 3 hours of homework to do, what's the best way to organize it? Going to sit there for 3 hours and get it all done?
Schedule your breaks.
Yeah, schedule your breaks. Are you then going to look forward to homework more? Is it going to be nicer to do, say, 50 minutes and have a break, and 50 minutes and have a break, and 50 minutes and finish? Or do 3 hours without a break? Which is going to be nicer? 50 minutes and a break, 50 minutes. You're going to look forward to it. Your brain's going to look forward to the break. In the break, your right brain's going to be being used, your daydreaming, your imagination, all that kind of thing is going to be happening. So as you use your memory, you are also going to be using your left and right brain better. So what I want you to do is to start to think of all the ways you can use this information. How can you, when you're studying, improve the way in which you do it? How can you make use of the fact that your brain remembers the first things, that it remembers the last things? What kind of things can you do to help your brain link when you're studying? I mean, for example, you could be underlining keywords in color is one way, but think of more. What kind of things can you do to make things outstanding in your memory? Think about that. How can you use your right brain to make things stand out in your memory? What kind of schedule are you going to have for studying? What kind of schedule in preparing for exams? What kind of schedule for homework? So think of all the ways in which you can improve your memory. Because once you get this amazing piece of equipment going, you can then start to apply the memory techniques. And you can also, when you're studying, make sure you remember it more. Okay, just before we get on to age and what happens to your brain as you get older, I want to review what we talked about on the left and right side of the brain. And the main points are that every one of you has all these capacities in your brain. And as a family, it's incredibly important you start to help each other and help yourselves think of ways in which you can use it more. How can you get more rhythm into your life, into your family, into your study, into your work? How can you get more color into your life? How can you get more logic, more analysis, more imagination, more daydreaming? How can you as a family start to use this incredible capacity that each one of you has? The other thing to remember is that if somebody now says to you, hey, you're pretty stupid, what are you going to say? What are you going to say if somebody says, hey, you're pretty dumb, pretty stupid? What are you going to say? You're going to say, I'm terribly sorry, but all the evidence says you're wrong, because I'm a genius, and I got proof. And you can then tell them. Very important to spread the news around. Right? A lot of people feel depressed, feel only human, feel dumb, feel stupid, because they've either proved it to themselves or they've been told, and you now know it's not true. So spread the good news. We then come to what happens to your brain as it gets older, which is another piece of often bad news. What happens to your brain cells as you get older? Anybody know? Anybody? They die, right? Do you know how many die a day? How many would you think? Millions, right? Anybody else? This is really depressing news here, huh? Billions. Every day, right? All these brain cells dropping off as you get older. What happens to your memory as you get older?
You lose it.
You lose it, right? It starts to go. And you're only human anyway, and you're losing all your brain cells, and your memory's going. What happens to your mathematical ability as you get older? Goes down, right? James, right there, goes down. What happens to all your mental skills as you get older? They can go up. What generally happens? They go down. Right? And the question is, why and do they have to? Now what I've done here is had drawn for you a little picture which shows what people normally think happens as the brain gets older. And up here, this arrow is showing what happens in terms of all your mental abilities. This is no mental abilities. This is really bright. This is when you're born. This is when you're 25 years old. This is when you're 50 years old, 75 years old, 100 years old. And what normally happens, people think, is that the brain gets better and better and better during the first few years, reaches a peak at around age 16, 17, 23, 24, and then the brain cells start to drop off, the memory goes, the mathematics goes, everything starts to get worse. Now, how do you know that the brain cells drop off? How do you know that? I've asked every group that I've taught for the last 20 years around the world, and they've all said, brain cells die, and it's 1,000 a day, or 10,000 a day, or millions, or billions. How do you know that? How do you know?
We're told.
Because somebody said so. So a group of brain researchers started to try to find out who said it. Who said the brain cells drop off? And what they discovered to their amazement was that nobody could find out who said it. And it turns out, your first piece of good news, that there is now no evidence. Dr. Marion Diamond especially researched this. There is no evidence that your brain cells drop off as you get older. None. There is evidence that as you get older, if you use your brain, if you use all those capacities that we talked about, your brain cells get more sophisticated, more complex, stronger. So as you get older, your brain cells get better if you use them, and you don't lose any. So that one you can wipe out. Not true. Which means that as you get older, if you get to this point on the graph here, to your peak, right here, if you continue to use your brain, it doesn't go down. Now the reason why for some people it seems to go down is what? Why do you think some people's brains begin not, do them?
They kind of give up.
They kind of give up. That's exactly it. They give up. They say, hey, I'm 23, I'm over the hill. The brain cells are already dropping off. I know my memory is going down. I've finished school or university, so I've had it. I'm on the way down. And they kind of give up and they stop using their brain. Now, if you stop using it, it gets a little bit worse. But if you continue to use it, start to use it more, get that rhythm going, get the color going, get the analysis going, become like the baby again, become like Da Vinci, what happens is it starts to go up again. And then maybe by the time you get to 30, you think, hey, well, I'm 30 now, and it's not so good, so I'm over the hill. And it'll start to drop down again. So what should you do? If you're 30 and you've kind of given up. Ungive up. Get back to using it again. And it goes up again. And what we've discovered is that you can use your brain from the time you're born till late in your life. 90, 100 years old, and it continues to get better and better and better for literally as long as you live if you use it. People say, oh yes, but it can't really be true because I'm 40 and my memory is going. We've got this big club around the world of people who say, my memory is going. And other people say, I know exactly what you mean. And this starts in school. Yeah. I left my homework, all my books at school. This is 15-year-old kids speaking. 40-year-old people say, I was in the office and I forgot to phone so-and-so, my memory's going. Somebody says, I know exactly what you mean. I can't remember names and faces. My memory's going. And everybody says, hey, yeah, my memory's going. My memory is yours. Yeah, mine's going too. And they all walk around arm in arm saying, isn't it great? Our memories are all disintegrating. And the truth is that they're not. How many things do you think your memory remembers every day? Roughly. Everything, and how much is everything in a day? How many things? Because you're right. How many things? Billions. It is billions. Every time you talk, that is your memory working perfectly. It memorizes every word and pours them out. And you listen perfectly, understanding. That's your memory checking all those words. You walk to school, you drive, you do whatever. That's your memory remembering how all those things work. And it makes one mistake and then you say, hey, I've got a lousy memory. It's got 9,999 million and one wrong. And you say it's no good. It is brilliant. And it gets better and better as you get older. And the only reason why people think it's getting worse is because they start to focus on when it makes a mistake. They say, I forgot the phone number. And they kick their memory. You're no good. And then next time they forget the briefcase and they say, forgot the briefcase as well, eh? You're no good. Now, if somebody says to you every time you do something, you're no good, what starts to happen?
Believing it.
You start believing it. So if you keep telling your memory, hey, you're no good, memory says, okay, all right, if you want me to be no good, I'll be no good. And then you start to forget things and you say, see, I told you my memory was no good. Now, all you have to do to get better as you get older is know that if you use it, it will get better. And then when you get to the age of 40, 50, your memory will be fantastic. Really amazing. Better and better as you get older and older. And the reason why some older people think that their memories are worse is because they remember back to when they were 6 years old. They think, and they say, I was really good then, but I'm no good now. But the difference between the 45-year-old person, this is a parent, say, who's left his briefcase in the office and says, oh boy, not so good, and the 6-year-old child who comes home from school, and the 6-year-old is left in school, forgotten, pens, pencils, watch, pocket money, jacket, PE equipment, all this stuff, is that when the 6-year-old gets home and realizes that all those things he or she's forgotten in school, she doesn't kind of collapse into a chair and say, oh boy, I'm 6 years old and my memory's going. Right? Because it isn't. And neither is it for the older person. So we now know that your brain has these amazing left and right side abilities, that you are really brilliant, that your memories work phenomenally, and that if you want it to get better as it gets older, it can. That your entire life ahead of you simply depends on you deciding to use the amazing capacity you've got. And it's very important in this situation for all of you in the family to help each other in that. If somebody says, you know, in the family, oh, well, I can't really do that because I'm no good in so-and-so, you say, you can. Somebody says, oh, you know, I'm a bit too old for that, you say, hey, come on. You can, right? You can. Somebody says, I can't really study anymore, I'm past that. You say, what do you say if somebody says, I can't study anymore, I'm too old? What are you going to say? You're not too old. You can get better as you get older. And if you think of some of the great older people you know, anybody here knows somebody who's 70 or 80 years old and still really going strong? Anybody? Hands up, let's see. Lots. Okay, what are those people like? The really great old grandparents. What are they like? What words describe them? Productive, what else? Childlike. Right, what else?
Creative.
Creative. Good one, James. Which? Busy. Right? Active. What else? Enthusiastic? Yeah? Uninhibited? Witty? Kind? Physical, right? Really physical. And we're talking about 70, 80, 90-year-old people here. What other group of people do those words we've just used describe? Kids, right? Kids. And all the religious books, all the psychological books, all the educational books, all the wise people say, become like a child again and you live a fulfilled life, lest you become as little children again. And the great older people do that. They become elders, they become the sages, they become the seers, they become the wise ones. And you out there who are already at this part of the graph, it's easy for you to become that. Those who are kids, look for those greater older people. When you get older yourself, it doesn't mean you have to have a walking stick and hobble around like this and be weak and slow and sit around in a rocking chair all the time and do nothing because you're finished. It means that by the time you're 80, you're going to be strong, you're going to be brilliant, you're going to be creative, you're going to be productive, you're going to be a naturally, fully realized, happy human being.